In the world of training and development or learning and development, if you're a business owner or if you are part of the teams creating the training, there is one common word that everyone should know and everyone should use. And that word is analysis. Hello, welcome to StyleLearn Origins. This is the podcast where we look at corporate training and development practices from their origins and valuable information that anybody can benefit from. I'm your host, Alex Salas. In today's episode, we take a look at needs analysis, job task analysis, and target audience analysis. These are all components of instructional design and primarily foundational core elements of training and development. However, it is possible that in your organization and in your company, you have instructional designers that do not perform a proper needs analysis and do not perform any of the further analysis going forward. This is a very common problem in the industry, especially if those instructional designers have a very strong educational background. They would tend to go into development, for example, or just jump right into content. And there are many other forces. This is not the fault of that individual, to be honest. This is a situation in which one can be in a company and not have the backing from leadership to be able to perform the specific things. But also there's quite a bit of misinformation out there. And there are some interesting things to look at in terms of where this started and where are we today. So welcome to StyleLearn Origins. So in terms of needs analysis, what we're looking at is the need for training. And this is something that usually happens in organizations. So let's say a manager sees lacking performance somewhere, or let's say someone sees a bad customer service being provided in a specific case or in specific situations, and that triggers somewhat of a need for training. This is seen often as well in government situations. We had the Starbucks situation that, they had to close and retrain. And was training really the issue there? Was it needed? Who knows? But the problem is that at any point you enter a situation with the public eye and legal situations and also government, training is usually one of the remediation steps. So let's talk about training in the actual business place. Let's assume that we need to train people to do the job when they come in. What are the hiring practices? There are many questions to be asked in terms of that. But there are usually three specific analyses that are done for the design of instruction and also for correcting performance issues. And there are many notable names out there that have contributed over the years to this. As an example, in our first episode, we discussed the work of Charles Rickerson Allen and the World War I effort with the Emergency Fleet Corporation. Well, in The Instructor, The Man and the Job, the seminal book by C.R. Allen, he discusses what is known as the trade analysis. And we can sort of translate at this point, trade meaning the job, the occupation. So in that, we have the job breakdown. And this is later implemented and refined by another gentleman that actually was part of that effort in what is known as the training within industry movement, which you can consider to be the second emergency response in the government dealing with World War II. So training within industry is probably going to be our next episode, which because it has rich information about training and development practices. Some people actually have called it the foundational core of human resources. But when it comes to instruction, there is the job breakdown action. So job breakdown, meaning You're going to grab the expert on that job, and they're going to break down each step on a job. This is very specific, though, because at the time and in the context, C.R. Allen was concerned with the training of what is quote unquote known green man. And again, to warn folks today, they're not used to the nomenclature and the words used. 1919, the notions, probably even up to 1950 or so, man was the term used, and it's hard to say if it's specific to the gender, because there was really no lack of women in workforce, but it's not as prominent. It wasn't as prominent as it is today, of course. In terms of needs analysis, there are these three different analyses, and that's what shows pretty much around the literature when it comes to analysis. First is the need for training, analyzing whether training is the solution to the issue, and that's what most discussions happen today. But how do we do that? How is that done? Where is the guidance for that? And today, instructional designers should be following many of the great contributions done since the beginning of time. So I'm considering beginning of time 1919 and the job breakdown sample sheet or list, which I'm putting here on the description as a link in that page of the book. And ideally what it is the jobs are broken down by step by step from the beginning of the sequence. So what is quite fascinating about the work of C.R. Allen and the book, The Instructor, the Man, and the Job, is that there was no notion yet of B.F. Skinner's successive approximation approach or successive approximation model, which means, by iteration, people achieve the goal, and that's more of a behavioral sort of studies. But really, when it comes to the needs analysis, you have needs analysis, which is determining whether the job can be, if the job can be done without training, or if training is actually the issue, or can there be other performance measures or attitudes or employee sort of adjustments, coaching, feedback that can actually solve the issue, because training will be costly at that point. And there was really no notion of that, although it is addressed within the book in page 363. And the way that it's addressed is by providing some guidance in terms of the use of the materials by instructors for self-training. And what the summation of this is Mr. Allen sort of suggesting to an instructor to take the job that is at hand and list out the steps required to accomplish that job. So think of a task in a job, or, let's think of a task, because a job is composed of many tasks. And so think of a task that someone has to do in a job. And that could be today as, managing a project or creating a spreadsheet report, something like that. And list the steps. And in the notion that we're talking about in the context of this period, and also for the Training Within Industries program, it was known that the individual doing this, or the instructor, was also a worker. So someone that actually knows the job. So it wasn't a notion there to have an instructional designer that did not know the job. It was, as they say, content neutral. And the reality is, it's not the job of an instructional designer to be content neutral, because it's not about content. It's about performance, it's about training and performance when it's needed, right? So the situation here is the tasks involved are listed. So it's almost like saying you write yourself the list, the steps to accomplish a task, and then you go find one of the best performers in that job or that specific task, and you watch that person do the job. This essentially is what is known today as a job task analysis. And this is prior any of the documentation we can see for task analysis, job task analysis for the most renowned names like Robert Gagne, Thomas Gilbert. This is way ahead of a time. So the notion there is to make that list yourself if you have expertise. And in the case today, if you don't have expertise, then you'll have to find one expert and do sort of a police approach type of interview, separate interviews. And you go and interview that one performer and ask for the list of steps. Then you go to the other performer and ask for the list of steps. And without any knowledge, without any, let's say, contamination of knowledge. These people should not know that they're being interviewed, the one is interviewing the other, and you just gather those steps, and then you watch the work being done. And that will suffice in producing any gaps that are there. But primarily, needs analysis also starts with a desired performance, and that's what we address later on as we see literature from Thomas Gilbert and in the book Human Competence. And then the establishments of mathematics, which actually is more for instructional designers, and it's completely a mirror of the Herbartian steps, excuse my accent, and the work that Alan did in modifying those steps as the show, do, act, and check. And no worries, our next episode will really dive into many of these topics and concepts. So today, an instructional designer should not just jump immediately into developing things. An instructional designer should be asking questions, but what guidance should that person follow? Because from 1919, it also was recorded that even though we have this demonstration of listing steps, it is very hard. It was noted that it's very hard for an expert to really accurately put this together in the best instructional way, only because you've never done it from that angle. So think of yourself. If you are very good at doing something, let's say playing the guitar, playing a solo on the guitar, or doing something else, sculpting, something like that, it's a different thing to automate the knowledge, to do it repeatedly, to cook a dish. I can cook breakfast and not even think, you don't have to think. You already have those skills cemented. You know where your objects are in the kitchen. You know what ingredients you need and what the outcome, obviously from the beginning, you know what the outcome is that you need, what kind of breakfast you're making, scrambled eggs versus fried eggs with bacon, no bacon, all those things. Hope I didn't make you hungry at this point. But from that perspective, we know it's hard from that point, and that continues to be the theme, or it continues to be reflected in the literature. So there is a study, it's a paper in 1967 from England by Annette and Duncan, and links will be in the description here, where they specify the same thing, which is, it's hard. What is it to be described in terms of task analysis? So some say, in their case, Annette and Duncan call for the rule, and the rule is, to simplify things, one item is, what is the probability without training of inadequate performance? And that's very interesting. That means is, what is it, how is it possible that people are going to fail? How likely is it that they fail if they don't receive the training? And this gets reinforced later in the 80s with a great book by Robert Gagne and Meagher and Piper. And it gets reinforced there as well. And also, Gilbert noticed this as well, which is that notion of dealing with the behavior and the accomplishments. In his case, he's looking at accomplishments first and the frequency of the activity. Those are all great things in terms of task analysis. And Gagne reiterates this in his book, Conditions of Learning, as well. And actually, he claims that the tasks, how to describe tasks, is not just should be limited to work or study, but they're actually sort of a live task. What they all agree on, though, is that there is a series of steps, and it should be a step-like sequence. Conversely, or let's say concurrently, in education, from the education side of things in academia, a lot of people look at the whole and break down specific steps. Sometimes that's called chunking. But in essence, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the whole, what is it that needs to be done, then break it down in manageable pieces and manageable step-by-step sequences. The second rule is, what would the cost to the system, what will be the cost to the system of inadequate performance? And this is also reiterated later on in the writings of Gilbert and other folks that have written on performance, because we have the movement of human performance technology as well coming up out of the 60s or so. Those two questions are very important. If we don't do training, what is the likelihood that people will not perform? And if they don't perform, what is the cost to the system? If you can answer those questions, then you should be able to determine, okay, well, then we need training or we don't need training. So this is it's an interesting find. It's a simple way to find, or simple way to address what the training should be usually not. Now, once training is meant to be part of the solution, and perhaps in today's world, we need to think also as well as processes, which is something that is called out from the beginning by Alan's book going forward, is that there should be a process in place and not just rely on training. So, and this is very important for any company today. You have to document your processes. You have to document the work, whether it's a new product being released, whether it's a new process in the work, it should be documented, easily accessible. That's what people need to use for work. You should not rely just on training. Training is just an event. Even if you set up a training program, that training program will eat quite a bit in your production. When we're talking about 1919, people are spending weeks on end, more than 8 weeks, on a training program. And there are some calls for reductions in training, but that's basically what we see in the progression of training and development, is reducing time and money. And in some cases, as you see today, that's why you get the layoffs of the first thing that goes is training, because you're reducing time and money. Out of those two things in this analysis, and once we decide training is in place, the job task analysis, the target audience analysis, and that means the folks that are going to be trained. Where are they? What do they do? What kind of education they have? Perhaps today that's a moot point in many cases, but it all depends on the audience. If you have a group of PhDs, you have to deliver instruction in a specific cadence, perhaps in a medium that they're very familiar with. PhDs like to read, so maybe reading is one of the things that they could do, but that is not exactly an instructional strategy. That's just part of the medium to be used. So in terms of needs analysis, again, is down to getting the job task analyzed and what are the specific actions to be done. So primary, that's needs analysis. That is analysis. Instructional analysis, Robert Gagne called for the need for learning analysis as well, because we have different skills in play. Now we're talking about different domains: cognitive, meaning thought processes, motor skills as well, psychomotor, and attitudes, which is very important. All of this was addressed as well in training within industry, which is very interesting and will be part of the next conversation we have. But when it comes at the end here and to wrap up, is the origins and needs analysis starts again with that big rush in production that we have due to the war effort in World War I, getting refined in World War II as well, and continuing then with the systematic approaches in instructional design. Perhaps the golden standard after that is the inner service procedures for instructional systems design model by Robert Branson out of Florida State University, where the famous ADDIE model or ADDIE process is then identified in every subsequent instructional design model begins with that foundation of analysis. So in conclusion, if you are a business owner and if you are an instructional designer or training and development professional, being a business owner, you have to consider that everything you do has to be analyzed, and this probably applies pretty much to what you do in your business. If you started a business, you have a business plan, you probably took a look at the market. It wasn't just a whimsical act. And that should be the same approach to training and development in terms of providing work processes first, and then analyzing whether training can be part of the solution or should be part of the only solution at that point. It will save you money. It will save you time, because otherwise you end up in what is known as the training cycle. And that is, people don't perform, you give them more training. People don't perform, you give them more training, and that will cost you tons of money. If you're an instructional designer or training development professional, please check the links in the description, as the article that I wrote, the ADDIE, the model that never was, has the references to the IPISD, and that will give you 19 steps to which to follow, which the first one's about 5 different steps. First, deal with the actual analysis phase. Analysis should be a continuous effort in the instructional design process, starting with the needs for it, the job task analysis, the target audience, and obviously, if you're addressing performance, the performance gap. What is desired and what is the current state? Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in the next episode.